Picture this. A Thursday night panel on government transparency. For lawmakers, one moderator, and what should have been a boring discussion about public records. But when Jasmine Crockett calmly laid out a timeline of documents exposing political misconduct, Karoline Leavitt panicked and called the cops. What you're about to hear is how one woman's refusal to back down sparked a national moment of reckoning that changed everything. It wasn't even supposed to be controversial. Standard stuff, really. Jasmine had been invited last minute after another congresswoman dropped out. She hadn't prepped a speech, just brought her usual stack of folders, highlighters, and a memory sharper than steel. The studio lights buzzed overhead in Arlington, Texas. The moderator gave his usual warm-up spiel about wanting a lively but respectful discussion. Jasmine didn't need the reminder. She adjusted her mic, glanced at her notes, and greeted the camera with that calm, unmistakable tone. Transparency isn't just a buzzword. It's the contract between the government and its people. Karoline Leavitt, seated 2 chairs over, exhaled hard, loud enough for her mic to pick up. C-SPAN wasn't used to drama, but tonight was different. Jasmine had come with documents. A slim folder of dates, names, and redacted memos. Stuff already published in government archives, but conveniently ignored by most outlets. As she started referencing them, her tone never changed. Measured, focused. On March 12th, an internal memo from the Office of Presidential Scheduling shows a closed-door meeting with 3 undisclosed energy executives, none of whom were registered on the White House visitor logs. That meeting directly preceded a federal rollback on environmental fines. Karoline tensed. Are you implying corruption in the Oval Office? Jasmine didn't even look at her. I'm reading from public documents, Karoline. The moderator jumped in, trying to ease the tension. But Jasmine wasn't raising her voice. She wasn't making accusations. She was just laying it all out, piece by piece. And it was working. When she referenced a second document, a timeline of policy shifts directly tied to campaign donors, Karoline interrupted. You're playing with fire. You know that. Jasmine gave her the first glance of the night. No, I'm just telling the truth. If that burned something down, maybe it needed to burn. Silence stretched for almost 5 seconds, enough for thousands watching at home to lean closer to their screens. Then the moderator called for a commercial break. The moment cameras stopped rolling, chaos erupted. Karoline turned to Jasmine. You think this is some kind of game? You're outing classified information on live TV. That's criminal. Jasmine's expression didn't shift. Nothing I said was classified. If you don't believe me, check the Federal Register. Karoline stood up so fast her earpiece fell to the floor. You'll regret this. Producers stepped in to separate them. But Karoline was already storming toward the exit, phone in hand, voice raised. Capitol Police. Yes, I need to report a breach of national security. Can you believe this? Karoline just tried to criminalize transparency on live television. But here's where it gets crazy. Back at home, millions of viewers had no idea what had just happened off camera. All they saw was an abrupt cut to commercial. No warning, no closing remarks. Just a tire ad with a jingle far too cheerful for what had just taken place. Meanwhile, Jasmine remained seated, leaning back, her expression unreadable. She knew Karoline had overreacted, but what she didn't yet know was that Karoline had just made a decision that would drag the story well beyond tonight's broadcast. In the hallway, Karoline's voice echoed. I'm not exaggerating. She shared sensitive data that could be used to undermine national security. The Capitol Police operator kept asking her to clarify which specific law had been broken. Karoline couldn't answer. She just kept repeating phrases like dangerous disclosures and irresponsible public conduct. Back in the studio, Jasmine finally broke the silence. Can someone call my chief of staff? He'll want to know this is going down. When Karoline walked back in 10 minutes later, holding her phone like a badge of honor, she was flushed. You're going to be sorry you ever opened your mouth tonight. Jasmine turned to face her. And you're going to be sorry you tried to use the police as your personal cleanup crew. The moderator tried to intervene. Ladies, please, let's be civil. We still have 20 minutes left in the show. Jasmine raised an eyebrow. You think I'm going back on air with someone who just tried to criminalize me for reading public documents? That shut the room up. The show producer stepped in. We're cutting the rest of the segment. We can't risk another confrontation. As Jasmine gathered her papers, her phone buzzed. Capitol Police were making routine inquiries based on Karoline's report. She would likely need to present a written statement in the next 48 hours. I didn't say anything that isn't already on record, she told her chief of staff. Let them dig through the files. It's all there. But what happened next would change everything. It only took 37 minutes for the clip to go viral. A freelance producer had been recording the studio feed from her laptop and caught it before the network could sanitize the footage. The video showed the exact moment Jasmine calmly cited the memo about energy executives, and Karoline's face twisted into something almost unrecognizable. By midnight, the hashtag "She Read Documents" was trending. But in D.C., things weren't nearly as entertaining. The Capitol Police actually responded with a formal inquiry, calling Jasmine's office around 11:45 p.m. Jasmine wasn't rattled. She'd dealt with worse. I quoted documents filed in open congressional records. I didn't even paraphrase. I read them verbatim. Her chief of staff, Noelle, was pacing her living room. Doesn't matter. They're trying to scare you or make an example out of you. Meanwhile, Karoline had already released a statement, long, dramatic, and heavy on the word reckless. She accused Jasmine of exploiting public trust and deliberately undermining national security. No proof, just buzzwords designed to provoke fear. But Karoline's miscalculation was underestimating how many journalists actually do their homework. By sunrise, two well-known political reporters had fact-checked every reference Jasmine made during the show. They posted side-by-side receipts. Jasmine's quotes, the documents they came from, the pages, the sources, the public access dates. Nothing had been leaked. Nothing had been classified. The truth was boring, but bulletproof. Online, viewers weren't just defending Jasmine. They were dissecting the broadcast like evidence in a trial. One TikTok creator slowed down Karoline's expression frame by frame, calling it the exact moment someone realizes the truth is louder than spin. Even some conservatives were getting uneasy. Senator Glenn Roy of Indiana tweeted, "Whether you agree with Representative Crockett or not, using police resources to intimidate a sitting member of Congress is a dangerous precedent." But Jasmine's silence was becoming more powerful than anything Karoline could shout. Little did they know, Jasmine was planning her next move. She wasn't thinking just about Karoline anymore. She was thinking about every person who'd ever been told they were too loud, too angry, or too ambitious the moment they started telling uncomfortable truths. When Jasmine finally spoke publicly, it wasn't where anyone expected. A small civic center in Bethesda, Maryland. No dramatic flags, no booming intro music. Just a single mic and folding chairs. She stepped up to the microphone and looked around. I won't be long, but I will be clear. What happened last week wasn't just an overreaction. It was a public attempt to turn truth into threat. She paused, let it sit. I was invited to speak about transparency. I did exactly that. I cited public documents every American has access to because I believe sunlight is still the best disinfectant. Her voice stayed steady, deliberate. But when some people hear the truth out loud, it rattles them. Not because they don't believe it, but because they do, and they'd rather you didn't. Then came the line that would play on loop for days. If speaking the truth scares you enough to call the cops, maybe you're the one who should be under investigation. The room went electric. Cameras zoomed in. She wasn't done. I've been called loud. I've been called angry. I've been called every coded word in the book. But what I've never been called and will never be is silent. She didn't shout. She didn't flinch. I have no interest in political theater. I have every interest in accountability. And if you think dragging my name through the mud will stop me, you haven't been paying attention. The video hit YouTube within minutes. By nightfall, 1,000 think pieces were already on the way. But while Jasmine was focused on doing the work, the White House was preparing its next move. And this time, it wouldn't be indirect. It started with a press release just after 6 a.m. on Tuesday. The White House accused certain members of Congress of using public platforms to mischaracterize executive processes and undermine national security narratives for personal gain. Right-leaning outlets picked it up immediately. One anchor went further. "We're watching the weaponization of transparency. This isn't courage. It's sabotage disguised as virtue." But then came the leak that changed everything. Around 1 p.m., a source inside the White House counsel's office provided an internal memo to a regional paper. The memo admitted that none of the material Jasmine referenced violated classification protocols. One line stood out. "The greater concern is a pattern of narrative building through legally accessible documentation, which poses a reputational threat to the executive branch if left unchecked." They didn't admit wrongdoing, but they admitted motive. And that was enough. Suddenly, Jasmine's critics looked reactive instead of righteous. Even their own lawyers knew she hadn't broken a single rule. That night, Jasmine posted a rare video to her social media. No production team, just her standing in front of her bookshelf talking into her phone. "I did not commit a crime. I didn't leak anything. I told the truth using public records. You could have looked up yourself. The fact that it caused as much panic tells me we've gotten too comfortable letting people lie to our faces because they sound confident while doing it." It was less than 2 minutes, but racked up over 2 million views by morning. Meanwhile, Karoline went quiet. Her social media slowed to a trickle. Her team released a single tweet. "We stand by our concern for public safety." No elaboration, no press appearance, no apology. But the public wasn't just paying attention. They were starting to speak up. Jasmine's office inbox filled up by the dozens every hour. Teachers, nurses, veterans, grocery clerks. Most saying the same thing. "I've never followed politics like this, but I saw what they did, and I'm not okay with it." Within a day, they had to hire 2 extra interns just to log incoming emails. Thousands from small towns and big cities, red counties and blue ones. One woman in Cheyenne, Wyoming, said she hadn't voted since 2008, but planned to register again just to support people who don't flinch when the heat comes. Then came the rally. It wasn't planned by any campaign. It started with college students in Arlington and spiraled from there. By Saturday, over 3,000 people gathered outside the same studio where Jasmine had spoken. Signs read "Truth isn't a crime" and "Facts over fear." Some held up copies of the documents Jasmine had cited, printed straight from government websites. Jasmine didn't attend. She didn't want to make it about her. But she watched the live stream, and so did the White House. One aide reportedly warned senior staff they were losing the narrative. But Jasmine wasn't interested in narrative. She was interested in change. That Monday, with cameras waiting outside and aides buzzing about press opportunities, Jasmine called her team together. "Here's what we're going to do. We're not going to spend our time turning this into theater. We're going to spend it making sure no one else goes through what I did for simply doing their job." She wrote 3 bullet points on a whiteboard. Legislation to protect whistleblowers and document transparency. Rules preventing police weaponization between members of Congress. A permanent online archive of every public record cited on air. "This isn't about clapping back," she said. "It's about making sure truth doesn't have to rely on courage to survive." When she stepped outside that afternoon, reporters expected another big statement. Instead, she smiled lightly. "No big speech today. Just wanted to let you know we've drafted a bill." One reporter asked, "A bill for what?" "To make sure what happened last week doesn't happen again." "Are you pressing charges against Congresswoman Leavitt?" Jasmine's face stayed calm. "No, I'm doing what she should have done in the first place. My job." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. But it was real. And that's what people were craving. In an age where outrage was currency and spin was sport, Jasmine had taken a moment of political targeting and turned it into a masterclass on integrity. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She didn't explode. She stayed still and let the truth echo louder than any accusation ever could. Later that week, visiting a high school in Fort Wayne, Indiana, a student asked her, "How you stay calm when people lie about you?" Jasmine looked the girl in the eyes and said quietly, "Because the truth has never needed permission to be true, and it never will." Walking out of the building, her chief of staff asked, "You think this will stick with people?" She nodded. Maybe not all of it, but they'll remember how it felt to see someone tell the truth and not fold. And if that sticks, even just a little, maybe next time they'll expect more from the ones who represent them. Sometimes the loudest answer is the one that doesn't flinch. When truth is inconvenient, some will try to bury it, twist it, or punish the people who speak it. But when you stand in it quietly, confidently, and with receipts, you shift the power. Jasmine Crockett didn't just survive a public smear. She used it to build something lasting. She showed us what happens when someone refuses to let fear silence truth. And in a world desperate for authenticity, that kind of courage doesn't just inspire. It endures.